So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Chris.
Good evening. We're the tired ones, aren't you guys? I wasn't going to speak because I think this evening is about the associates, but I did want to say a couple of things. One was about the ways in which the money that gets donated and the programs that get created create a synergy, an unexpected configuration that is hard to even understand. So when I arrived, Nick met me at the airport, and I had been told this was going to be in Orlando. So as we started heading south, I was like, oh dear. I'm going to disappear me in the swamps now. Because I'm Nigerian, so I don't trust anyone. And when we turned in the gates, I was like, Jurassic Park, here we go. But it was a wonderful moment, and sometimes it's hard to explain what happens here. But sometimes you walk out of your cabin, and you're walking up to breakfast, and you pass a Brazilian dancer who's stretching on the boardwalk in front of you, but in the most beautiful way in the morning light, and he doesn't notice you're there, and it's like you stumbled into the performance of the spirit. And you turn a corner, and there's a crabby 73-year-old beautiful woman insulting you and having these most amazing conversations with you. We have writers from Nigeria, mass artists from Nigeria, mass artists from the Caribbean, an amazing composer from the Caribbean, people from South America, people from Brazil, and the Brazilian connection has been really amazing because in this one place, I think between us we've bridged 400 years of history. The way in which these are Africans who have been dislocated from the motherland and taken somewhere else, and whose research, whose work corresponds to the work some of us are doing here. And to me, here has been amazing. So when you give money, it's hard to understand sometimes what you're giving it to, but you're giving it to something spectacular. I can assure you that. I've had an amazing week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't want to go because time is so short, but so what's happened is that I've encountered mostly dazzling talent. But more than talent, because talent doesn't mean anything. It's a difficult thing to hear. All that matters is staying power, the ability to keep returning to difficulty and try to make something beautiful from that. And this is what's happened this week with the writers, the composers, the dancers. I don't even know what to call them. They're not dancers. They just call them spirits, these Brazilians. They're like disembodied, embodied ancestors. So I really didn't want to take away from their time. I just want you to enjoy what you're going to see and to realize that the work being done here, apart from its artistic value, has a cultural value that's hard to measure. It not only has a cultural value, it has a spiritual value. And it's a difficult thing to say because people distrust the word spirituality. But if there's a hope at all for any of us, post what's going on right now in this country, I think that's really the way forward, which is a way to enfold all of our differences. And this happens seamlessly every day here. And so that's a beautiful thing. So that's all I wanted to say, but I will leave with one thing, and partly for all the writers, especially that I've worked with, because they've had me for 3 weeks, and I can assure you it's not an easy task. So much so that on the first day I built in a caveat to all our encounters, where I say, if it gets too much, just look me straight in the face and go, fuck you, Chris Abani. And it has been redeemed many times. But this is the way that we measure the difference between change and transformation. Change is just moving a little bit along the same spectrum. Transformation is when the world disappears underneath you, but that there is a community to hold you. So because of that, and because they returned every day, I mean, there may be some Catholic masochists among them, that's a whole other story. I wanted to offer them an old Yoruba prayer. I will translate it after I've said it, but I'm not going to translate it directly, I'm going to translate the spirit of it. And because Barbara's been asking for this for weeks now, this is partly for her. Awodo yigi, Otaomi o, awodo igi, otaomi, awodo igi gawo kumo, awodo igi, otaomi, aforibale, adiki o, aforibale, adiki, aforibale, awo kumo. Aforibale, adiki, awodo igi, otaomi o, awodo igi, otaomi, awodo igi, gawo kumo, awodo igi, otaomi. Is it the water that shapes the stone at the bottom of the river, or the stone at the bottom of the river that shapes the water? This was told to those who would come every day to the place of difficulty to transform themselves into something spectacular, something beyond beauty. Every day I return to this question, and in the spaces between the stone and the water, I have found eternity. Because there is water, because there is a stone at the bottom of the water, I can no longer die. And this is the reason why I return every day to the place of difficulty, to transform myself into something beyond beauty. Thank you.
I guess I'm not going to be introduced. I'll introduce myself. My name is Bahz Iannoli. I'm going to read from a story in this collection of stories I have, and this is called The Red Coat, and it's about a woman whose mother constantly attempted suicide and then was successful. And she left town, and this is her first time back to the place where her mother died. And it's called The Red Coat. All right, let me get a grip on myself here. Transformation Beauty Shop had a hand-lettered sign in the window saying, "Walk-ins welcome." Right then and there, I decided to try my luck. "Come on, Rummy. Come on in with me to see if I can get a new hairdo." Rummy touched my arm. Wait right there, he said as he stepped out into the snow, so tall, wearing the camel hair coat I had given him. He came around to my side and opened the door. I reached up and held his arm as I slipped out of my seat, and we headed into the beauty shop. "Do you have time for me?" I asked and wanted to run. "Come on in, honey." She wore a plastic embossed name tag, Audrey, and a bright plastic apron with yellow images of bananas on it. "Sit right over here and let's have a look at what you got." The little salon had 2 chairs and wide mirrors. The entrance table, covered in a purple velvet cloth, held a plastic stand of business cards, lettered in pink and purple. There was a bowl of mealy-looking apples, a statue of some beautiful foreign lady, and a crystal ball. Incense was burning. I sat in the chair while Audrey pumped it out so she could go to work. She snapped a black nylon cover over me and unfastened my ponytail. Looking over at Remy, still standing in the entry, Audrey said, "Sit right over here, young man. I'm going to make this woman of yours look like $1,000,000. She took me over to the sink and washed my hair, rubbing hard, massaging my neck. Audrey's touch on my head made me drowsy with pleasure. She poured cream rinse over my hair, rinsed it out, sat me up, and wrapped a thick white towel over my head. Back to the chair, she gently combed my hair back, oohing and awing, and telling me what nice hair I had. "I think a nice bob and some color would take 10 years off of you," she said. "Make you look like a movie star. I mean, look at those cheekbones." She picked up her little scissors, snapping them open and closed as she studied my head. Then she grabbed a hunk of hair and lopped it off. "That's the ticket," she said. I looked over at Rummy, his large hands in his lap, looking slightly astonished. Rummy was not subject to fluctuating emotions, but we worked, Rummy and me. He was a kind man and still handsome. Audrey moved my head back to face the mirror. "Head straight, please," she grumbled. "You don't want me to mess this up." I watched Audrey in the mirror, her lips tight in concentration, snipping away, a mad woman. Chunks of hair dropped onto the floor. I unexplainably felt lighter, as though with every snip, all that holding to my mother dropped away, too. I once slipped upstairs here, I said to Audrey. She stopped mid-cut and met my eyes in the mirror. When it was at the restaurant, she asked. She kept holding my eyes as I nodded. My mother loved to eat here. She still talks about the Cavatellis as though they were the host of Jesus. She looked back at my hair and began to snip again. I'm sorry about your mother. Okay, now how about some color on this? Hide that gray, take years off your face. Color even makes wrinkles disappear. I looked at Rummy, feeling like a small girl getting my first haircut. Okay, I said to Audrey in the mirror. She ran off and came back with a small white plastic bowl and a tiny paintbrush. She draped a thick plastic sheet over me, separated and clipped my hair into sections, and began to dip the brush into the dye and paint my hair. This is going to be your natural color all over again. When all the color had been painted on, it was a thick mess of goo. She placed a plastic cap on me and set me under the hairdryer. Just a few minutes, she said. I dozed under the cover, feeling peaceful with the heat. When Audrey finally started to comb out my hair, it was a shiny, deep black, like coal. Audrey sprayed and shaped my hair, clucking. I am a master, always have been. You look beautiful, transformed. That's what I do, transform. Oh my God, I lost the page. Hold on. She was right. I could see my mother and remembered, even in death, how beautiful she was, lying in the grass with her hair plastered to her head, with the muck from the water where she drowned herself. It was beautiful. And me, I look beautiful too, transformed. You know how on television when there's a missing child and they do that fancy photography that shows how a person might look after many years? Well, that's what happened. I saw her and me. I was her, forward, from 35 when she took her life to now 60. Audrey hugged me hard and helped me out of my red coat. I was crying. Look at you two, she said. Transform. That's what I do, and it's not bad work if you can get it, eh? Back outside, I saw a few red cardinals pecking at the seed that Audrey had thrown out at them. One of them had a black head like mine. Is he sick, I asked. Nah, that one's molting, she said. Gonna get him some fancy new feathers pretty quick. Then she reached over and ruffled my hair. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Rec room, baby showers, and first birthdays that wound themselves through the day and spun themselves into night like summer sunshine. Girls in frilled dresses, twirling to music and thick frosted sugary cakes with strings of candy-coated pearls and trays that your mom made of pastelitos and moro and ensalada de papa. And the smell of chicharrón next to paper-wrapped slices of limon spills into the hall like the bass of music that dances out the window into the courtyard. At the building where your tia lives, and your abuela too, and the primo that nobody knows how he's your primo, but a friend from forever, and other tias and other abuelos and primos and other buildings, tenements like gift boxes, and little boys and little girls riding tricycles down paths, and somebody's mom watching from the window, and neighbors on the stoop catching sun and all the scoop, and down the street driving through the maze of double-parked cars and mechanic shops squeezed tight together and riding down the sidewalk in reverse to get out of the spot that's been blocked. And before that, passing rows of empty lots, brick buildings with windows blown out like missing teeth, scraggy grass poking through concrete, and yellow dandelion faces smiling between cracks and speckled glass among the weeds grown to my knees, and the beauty of forgotten stories. There are two more. This next one is, I've been thinking about body and memory and sort of like what Chris was saying, spirit. So I hold in my body a story or many, stories I know, stories hidden deep in the bones along my spine, wound around my ribs, stories I wear in my eyes, ones that fill my head and heart and tell themselves to me over and over again during a quiet moment. Stories that whisper their pain on a dark night when they think no one is listening. Ones that shout across a cliff, hoping to reach the other side, carried by an angry wind and forced out of the lungs, once and for all, hopefully. Stories that I don't know yet, lost along a trail of memory that wishes it weren't real, stories that are mine because they live along my DNA but were written long before this body had a name, stories carved into rocks, gathered round first fires, told in tongues I've never held, stories that wake me from a dream, sweaty, shaken, longing, missing a face I can't see and a body I've never felt, stories that play on repeat through generations, that sing along a summer breeze and dance out of a steaming pot, a recipe through centuries, passed through centuries, and carried in boats and on the flash of airplanes. Right now, there is a story that wants to be told, living in the bones between my shoulder blades, a story trapped in the backside of lungs, sending grief into vertebrae of my neck, where it tightens lodged in the silence. A story that I am trying to learn and unlearn at once, with memories that flash behind eyelids, phantom fingers of regret that grab along waist, breasts, legs, choking away hope, a story too old for books and too new not to brace a listener to the back of his chair. Even though he knows the story, it lives in his palms and his clawing, coaxing words like fingers, the weight of chest pressed to squeeze truth away. Knows it too well and lives and grows inside the silence. Muffled words pushing through crevices between stifling hands that cover a story's mouth. There are other stories too, airy as a butterfly wing and the grace of blinking eyelashes kissing a cheek. My body is writing a story that caresses my hair, mornings at sunrise, soothing itself, flat-palmed above my heart, and lives there, listening, listening, listening. And the last one I wrote for our little writer family here and Chris. Sometimes it takes a sledgehammer, a blowtorch, a diamond drill water-cooled with fresh tears, to crack open the tenderest of shells, resting in the small of your hand, and get at the beating heart within, where magic lives and blossoms outward like sun splatter tiptoeing across palmetto leaves. Thank you.
My name is Phil Jackson. I'd like to take a moment to thank the ACA and all the supporters for the opportunity to be here to work with such great artists. It has been an experience that has enriched me and for which I will be forever grateful. I'd also like to thank Chris Abani for his guidance and his encouragement. It has changed me and improved my work in ways I never imagined when I arrived here. And to paraphrase something that he said earlier that he's heard many times, bless you, Chris Abani. Now, I'd like to read an excerpt from the novel I'm working on, a thriller titled Caretaker. As this chapter opens, the protagonist, Peter Driver, who has been drawn into an intrigue, has been told by his friend that the man he has been caring for, Jonathan Ravensdale, has a connection to his father. As they drove to Arlington, Driver sat passively processing the information with which Stanford had just stunned him. Driver had spent his life with the reoccurring wound that was his father's constant absence. His father died in service to the country when Driver was almost 12, but he had never really dealt with what that meant to him personally, whether it made his constant deployments okay. Right after it had happened, a lot of people, mostly military, came by to comfort his mom and him with condolences and the standard platitudes about the honor of sacrifice, how his death had saved many lives, his bravery, the tradition he upheld, and so on. But no one told him what he was supposed to do now, how to live with his father's death, his permanent absence. What pain he could feel was connected to his mother. So he followed her lead at the funeral. He mimicked her expressions and went where she told him, and saluted the coffin at the gravesite like she said. But the sadness he felt was primarily for her. How could it be otherwise? His father was deployed most of Driver's life, so he mostly had only memories of him, snapshots. Actually, they were more like scenes. Teaching him to hit a ball, going fishing, the time he surprised him by coming home for his 9th birthday. But it had been mostly just his mother and him and a picture of his father that hung on the wall by the TV. He could only remember one Christmas where they had been together. In a perverse way, it helped that they hadn't spent a lot of time together. When he was told his father was gone, it felt more like a distant relative had died, an uncle or a cousin, not a parent. It wasn't that he didn't hurt. The day he got the news was only the second time in his life he had cried. But his tears were not so much for his father's death, but for the lost time his father had told him they would have together one day. A week later, his life was back to normal. His father wasn't home before, and now he wasn't home. So his life was really no different. He eventually got to where he forgot about the date. He even forgot his father's birthday. After the funeral, the only time he really thought about him was on Veterans Day. Despite all that, he did love his dad in a vague, abstract way, and even missed him occasionally. And he was, of course, proud of him. This was especially true now, after hearing what Stanford had told him. He was stunned that his father and Ravendale could have any connection, much less one that involved his father's death. Although as he reflected on it now, he realized how plausible it was that they could have met. His father was military special operations, and Ravendale was covert operations. Of course they could have crossed paths. He now also realized the significance of the story Ravendale told him the day before he was killed, about a mission where a soldier sacrificed his life to save the lives of all the people at his base, including Ravendale's. That soldier must have been his dad. His father had died in some kind of covert operation. This was why his mother and he were never told how he died. And it was clear now what Ravendale meant when he said he chose him as a caretaker. He wanted to meet the son of the man who had saved his life. He obviously felt he owed his father a debt. Maybe, in some twisted way, whatever Ravendale was doing that got him killed was his way of trying to repay that debt. But instead, he had drawn him into a dangerous game. A game where he didn't know the rules, or who was playing, or what winning looked like. But what struck him most poignantly was that his father, and Ravendale, had propelled him into the very life that killed them both. That despite what good intentions Ravendale and his father may have had, the result was that he was involved in something dangerous, even something deadly, and that Ravendale, like his father, had left him to find his way alone. Thank you.
My name is Emilio Bascuñán. I'm from Chile, and have a translation with my Brazilian friends. I'm talking about Zenit. I prefer read the idea because my English is a little baby English, but Zenit is my current project. This light electronica with acoustic instrument. The name Zenit or Zenit comes from Arabic and the highest point in the sky in relation to the observer and just above the head in this at 90 degrees. From personal perspective, I like acoustic and electronic music as a joint path toward the development of a contemporary language, where both parties, each with their particularities, work together in the configuration of a dialectic discourse of a contemporary evolution. The acoustic as a tradition for mechanical physical interpretation of an instrument with all its properties and electronics as a new world of timbres, configuration, and possibilities when it's come to thinking and interpreting the individual and collective sounds. The very idea, of course, is incarnated and carried by numerous bands, composers, and some artists in that moment. Now, thinking of popular music, for example, Björk, 90 Nails, or Radiohead, for example. But I emphasize this because it's my own work and I associate and incarnate this idea as my own focus in my music and sound discourse. During the resident, I designed song and produced a series of pieces about 50 minutes of music, thinking about the additional release of an album. Do this work in Ableton Live as a software. The work has three versions: an electronic version with band, with percussion and bass player, 2 players and me. The remix version is the second version when I used the computer for create other version to the same. And the acoustic version is an idea with write the same music, but different players, voices, saxophone, bass player, drums, percussion, and ensemble. That's the idea. Now I'm going to play the first idea for you understand it's a little come on. It's a little performance. Very good. The idea now is adaptate the electronic music and ensemble music. And for explain, the first score is a voice, alto sax, tenor sax, trombone, accordion, piano, or organ, double bass or electric bass, I don't know, marimba, and 4 percussion. And that sounds, it's the same music.
transport the electronic music are new acoustic music. It's very, in my impression, it's very interesting when you translate or transform one sound, electronic sounds in that case, in acoustic sound. This is my project now. I have 15 minutes to the electronic music, and now I want to also write for ensemble. To say thank you.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for having us. I I can't tell you as a writer how wonderful and important it is to be in residencies with artists that are not writers or are writers and also work in other forms. The joy with which they produce is sometimes counter to our own process of being trapped in our heads, and really important to see and work with. So that's been great. And also, as you've seen here, how international this residency is. It's not always that way, and how important that is for all artists, and especially for all of us right now at this time in history. So thank you, ACA. And I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to recognize an ancestor who has just passed, Ntozake Shanjay, who is also a master artist here, and she just passed this week. And I know I speak for many of the writers here when I say one of the reasons I write is because she wrote.
Ntozake Shanjay.
I actually don't know what I'm reading, so I have two choices. Let's see, what do you guys feel like?
Pick the first one.
Okay, I'm picking the first one. It's called Good People. Taïd and Sadie met in a Skype interview in which Taïd's microphone did not work. During the interview, Taïd typed and Sadie read his questions aloud and answered. Sometimes she asked questions and he typed the answers. Both of them laughed more than either of them had in months. For Sadie, maybe a year or more. Taïd went home to his young and beautiful wife, who looked radiant as she held their new baby to her breast. She sat on the veranda in the fading tropical light, watching the green leaves turn greener. She asked about the interview, and he said it had gone well. He told her about the microphone, and she laughed. He said Sadie was very witty, and he'd enjoyed the conversation. His wife had already seen Sadie's CV, so she knew what she looked like. She held the baby against her shoulder and kissed Taïd on his lovely full mouth. "Don't you forget about us, mister," she joked. They went to bed with the baby sleeping sweetly beside them in his clip-on cot under a mosquito net that hung from the ceiling. Sadie got the job. Sadie fell in love with Taïd. They were both passionate about their work, the Togo Millennium Goals project, sponsored by the UN, but with autonomy and decision-making and expenditures so critical they both thought. And Taïd believed in it, unlike the grumpy, cynical alcoholic she worked with in Addis. In a not creepy way, Taïd looked like her father as a young man. His smile was sudden and cracked his whole face open. He smiled a lot. When he smiled, she smiled, as if their mouths were connected. No one had made her smile for such a long time. Taïd fell in love with Sadie. Love was not exactly the right word. Love was what he felt for his beautiful wife and their baby, who had a new expression every day and seemed to find him very clever. The baby sat in his wife's arms contentedly and gummed pieces of her lovely long hair. Her face was framed with curls slick with their child's saliva. They curved damply around the pink flesh of her cheeks as she bent over their son, making her even more beautiful. Taïd loved his wife. What did Taïd feel for Sadie? He did not know, but he wanted to be around her all the time. She said smart things, and when someone said something she didn't find so smart, she raised her eyebrows almost to her hairline and dipped her chin and looked straight at the person until they changed the thing they said. She bought a moto her first week on the ground, and when she drove, she wore little wax print dresses with old jeans underneath, which she pulled off at her destination, revealing platform heels and pretty great legs. Also, when she concentrated, she sucked in her cheeks and pursed her lips a little like a fish. Each time she did that, he wanted to kiss her, to put his lips in the hollow beneath her cheekbone and work his way to her mouth. It was all he could think about all the time, until he got home and saw his beautiful young wife and strong, healthy baby and thought, what have I done, bringing this woman into our lives? Taïd's wife, to her relief, was entirely consumed by love for the new being who depended upon her for all the things in its existence. She now had no way of understanding her friends who'd expressed frustration during their own children's infancy. Anna could imagine no greater bliss than sitting on her baby glider in the late morning light as her tiny son sucked from her own pink breast, gazing straight into her eyes as though he could see the very soul of her and was grateful for it. When the baby slept, she read her books and online journals and blogs and edited articles for a history and architectural magazine, felt better informed than she had in years. When the baby was awake, she sang to him and told him stories that she riffed off the books she read while he slept. He waved his fists with delight at it all. Anna felt the expansiveness of the world, of the baby room, of the veranda where they sat sometimes together, the vast reaches of her own mind and her books, and the love between herself and this small creature who was no longer of herself, but from whom she could not imagine ever being apart. One afternoon, Taïd came home early from work and sat at the kitchen table. He caught Anna by the waist as she walked by and closed his eyes and pressed his face into her belly, which was still a little soft from the baby. She felt mildly surprised to find him there in her physical presence. She'd been thinking of an article she was reading about architectural developments in southern France under the Moors and listening for the baby to wake up. Milk was beginning to drop from her right breast. She looped her arms around Taïd's shoulders and felt a stirring for him that she had not for months. She put her hands in his thick hair and gently touched the soft fur that ran down his neck and into his shirt collar with her fingertips. He held her tightly at the small of her back and kept his face against the buttons of her shirt. They stood like that for some time, and then Anna realized Taïd was weeping. "Sadie's pregnant," he said. "I can't let her do this alone. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I swear to you, Anna, I'm not a bad man." It took Anna some time to understand who Sadie was, how she could possibly be pregnant, what any of it had to do with Taïd. She'd met Sadie, of course, knew her vaguely in the context of Taïd's work. She was funny and pretty and swore a lot, and Anna remembered that she moved her hands urgently while she talked so that her words seemed more definitive than perhaps she meant them. But while Anna had imagined many things from her chair in the baby room, Taïd, lying next to his co-worker with his penis flaccid and at rest after expelling the wet warmth that had so recently been hers alone, had not been one of them. She'd simply had no idea and felt oddly guilty. It was as if she'd taken too much pleasure in her and baby John's time together, and now that time was marred by the knowledge of what Taïd had been doing during it. It was an odd way to experience heartbreak, and Anna observed this oddness in herself just as she saw the entire scene of Taïd's confession from a little ways apart, as if it were happening to someone else entirely. At some point in the telling, John cried. Anna went to get him and felt the discomfort ease from her breast the moment he began greedily to suck. As Taïd paced and gestured and explained and apologized, Anna sat at the table, tensing her muscles now and then to better feel the small weight of their child in her arms. "I don't think you are a bad man," Anna said, after they'd talked a while, and she understood that he was leaving her. "But what you're doing, what you've done, is really bad, Taïd. It's exactly what bad men do." "I know," Taïd said. "I know, Anna," and he wept. Thanks.
I'm so glad that Chris Abani told us there's space for all of our writing, because it's amazing to hear beautiful work and be in the presence of my fellow residents. So I'm Jennifer Cooper. I'm very grateful to be here, and this is called New Neighborhood. On her walks, a fiberglass shark peers out at her from someone's lawn, its teeth gleaming. The shark wears a necklace of doubloons, but there is no parade here, no one at all. No front porch barbers, no inflatable swimming pools stuffed with whole families cooling off. No teens taking selfies with secret desires of an actual physical encounter at next week's house party. The sky stays blue, dotted with cotton ball clouds, but the sun goes from white gold to yellow. Patches of trees offer shifting shade, respite from the bright. A woman hurries to bring in the empty trash can, does not wave back. Another ushers her children inside. W stickers still cling to a few bumpers. Shinier are the Trump ones. She thinks about an incident in the nearby laundromat earlier that day, an aggressive skinhead white man pushing past a black woman and the black woman saying under her breath, "The struggle is real." Because she greets him, A man working to repave the road tells her she must be a Southern belle. She knows it has to do with her accent, not her appearance, and she wishes she can be okay with this. As she dries up, as lines identify her, as she is no longer firm and juicy, let her become a raisin, sweeter naturally than the grape from which it came. She doesn't feel sweet, walking, thinking about sex, lust snaking through her, shy and sneaky. She'd like to shed her skin. She wishes to be unseen, rest under branches, to be held by moist wood stumps, to slither efficiently. A block later, she believes herself to be a psychic. Behind closed doors, she sees another round of ears roughly pushed into koozies, whose colors match one of the sports teams here. Fists slam places less conspicuous than eyes. Hands pinch and pull skin, darkening it. Someone's air supply gets squeezed off. Here, drugs don't get dealt on porches or out of cars, but drop from a sky full of whirring little four-seater planes. Shade spreads, slow to meet its companion evening. Dribs and drabs from her own life come back to her, trickles irritating as roof leaks. Her mind a colander trying to catch rain, protect flooring. Tears, cum, urine, vomit, all mixing to a nasty wallpaper paste. No one ever bought her or sold her or auctioned her virginity. Theft without struggle. She offered herself to them, even paid a few. Gifts or loans never meant to be repaid. Bribes. She mistakenly believed in filling the love hole with sex. She begged. For a blink she was compelling, unusual and other, but never pretty. What stayed with her for decades, though, was that potent combination of naivety, eagerness, and injury, an irresistible mixture to predators. Like a large bottle of perfume spilled a while back, its cloying stench finally fades. She is walking, just stretching out her legs, hoping to absorb some vitamin D, hoping to learn happiness is a new neighborhood, somewhere she could live. This woman cannot trust a gentle breeze. Gently waving palmetto fronds only produce in her a queasiness, premonition of disaster. Lives here in this new neighborhood must get rolled away like trundle beds, she decides, seen only if you're invited to spend the night. Whose underwear are being yanked down along with the blinds? Why does her brain operate this way? Yesterday she went alone to the beach. She'd invited the rest of the group, but no one else came. Although she didn't take it personally, it was painful. She guesses there is too much pain woven into the cloth of her, that soon they'll put her on some medication, that then she'll battle the side effects of this instead of the pain. When she was a girl, although she was an only child, one of her two girl cousins, 2 years older, lived catty-corner. This cousin, a lawyer now, and a mother, and an addict, was an outgoing, bossy child. They played together, believing God lived in a brightly colored super ball they'd gotten at the dime store. Ask God a question, the answer was in how many times the ball bounced before slowing to a roll. An odd number and your answer was no. An even number meant yes. You couldn't ask questions that weren't yes or no. Her cousin said God didn't have time for all that. In that shuttered alcove on her side of the street, the cousins bounced the ball. God revealed amazing wisdom on crushes, kisses, grades, and bedtimes, all via yes and no. Then her aunt got hooked on crack, and her cousin got sent to live across town with her rich father. Back then, across town was like out of town. Her family's car always seemed to be broken, so the girl didn't see her cousin much. And on those rare occasions when she did, her cousin, dolled up in pretty clothes, skin flushed, couldn't get away quickly enough. Like their Super Bowl guide, she only seemed to have time for the yes or no questions. Alone in the alcove, the girl asked the Super Bowl guide if her aunt would get off crack. No. Would her cousin come back? No. When her aunt got down to 85 pounds, she asked the guide, Super Bowl, if her aunt would die. No. When her mom swept the alcove, the girl was happy to see their almighty ball in with the dust. You want this? Isn't this yours? Her mom asked, pointing to the little fuzzy gray sphere. No, thank you, ma'am. She isn't psychic or a snake, just a woman who does not see the glass half full, who sees glasses of lipstick marks and backwash. She thinks about her thickening waist, thinning hair, receding gums, the bags under her eyes, the extra chin. She gets why her mom no longer tries. Central air and heat units were, their civility creating distance and privacy, like the white noise machines at therapy offices, where she sheds tears and money in futile attempts to cure loneliness. Done with her walk now, she lays down, fingering the 5 shells she collected from the beach, smoothed by sand and salt water, ridged because that's the kind of shells they are. They once housed live beings. All she can think about is something she heard about givers and takers and how neither can help it. She shudders with the certainty that she is a taker. Thank you.
I wanted to introduce myself. I'm a composer, performer from Miami. I'm going to show you two pieces today.
What's your name, George?
George. My name is George. So I'm going to show you one piece from a performance at the Freedom Tower in Miami for skateboarders and for skateboarders playing ukuleles. And so this is 12 performers skateboarding and playing ukulele in Miami. And this is from a series. I wrote 12 of these pieces. This is the second one, and it's, I could read it to you. I have the score right here. Push and get on. Play a pulsating chord that decelerates with the skateboard. Repeat. So this is repeat it. the artist in residence here, the master artist, and I've learned so much from Chris, just everything throughout this entire time through these 3 weeks, and I'm very grateful. So I wanted to give a special thanks to him. And so I was inspired to write a little poem. And I'm going to have Bahz and Elizabeth come join me. So this is a permutation poem, at least that's what I'm calling it today. And yeah, and I hope you enjoy it.
Chris Abani.
Chris Abani.
Chris fuck you, Abani.
Chris.
Chris fuck Abani. Chris you Abani fuck. Chris Abani fuck you. Chris Abani you fuck. Abani fuck you, Chris. Abani fuck Chris. Abani you fuck Chris. Abani you Chris fuck. Abani Chris fuck you. Abani Chris you fuck. Fuck you, Chris.
Abani, you fuck Chris.
Fuck you, Abani Chris. Fuck Chris, you Abani.
Fuck you. Abani Chris. Fuck you, Chris Abani. Fuck you, Abani Chris.
Fuck Abani Chris.
Fuck Chris, you Abani. Chris Abani, you. Fuck Abani, you Chris. Fuck Abani, Chris.
You Chris Abani fuck. You Abani fuck Chris. You Abani Chris fuck.
That's a hard act to follow. Well, now for something a little different, but on the theme of transformation. My name is Melanie Jennings. I studied with Chris and the other amazing associate artists. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here who made this residency possible, in whatever form that was, whether you fed us or you gave money or supported us in any other way. It's been life-changing for me. While I was here, I worked on a novel called The Womanizer. In the interest of time, I have slashed and burned a little bit, so I'll give you a little bit of background. Imagine a dystopian future where women must be covered and chaperoned, and infertility is a problem. In this scene, Mark and Tony are two twin brothers. They go to the carnival for their birthday, and it is the beginning of a holiday that's called Pink Moon. The Womanizer stood tall in the center of the fairgrounds. On its facade were painted an antique house with dormer windows, a cherry pie on a windowsill, and a field of grain waving in the distance. Two dimple-cheeked women in sparkly pink headscarves and long matching jackets beckoned riders from the house's porch, a small ledge framed by a miniature picket fence. I wondered if the women were real women or men who'd already gone in and come out. There was no way to tell. "Get your girl on!" A bearded man with an island tattoo on his temple and scars on his forehead barked at the crowd of young men surrounding the porch. "Come in with a Y, leave with 2 X's. No better bang for your pink moon buck than right here." He pointed a red laser at the main features of the facade, the cherry pie and the field of grain, before bouncing the red spot across the pair of bosoms. The dimpled young women straightened up, stuck out their chests, and winked in unison. "Wears off in no time, but time enough to dinky-dink and plinky-plink." The man called at the crowd. "See how the other half lives, but reunite with your family jewels before week's end." A team of doctors and scientists had invented the technology, a gas, after the fire. It was supposed to fix the infertility problem by creating more women. But the womanizing effect never stuck. It only ever lasted a few days. Someone got the bright idea to turn it into a carnival ride, and it had become a pink moon sensation, a chance for men to be female, a few days of weird, mind-altering experience that was said to lengthen the size of your dick once the XX chromos wore off. I've heard plenty of stories of guys who've gone in and come out, real chicks, no dicks, and had the time of their lives. And who didn't want a bigger dick? A very short man in a top hat appeared from the side door, his black coattails dusting the ground. I shoved and pushed to the front of the line, propelled by Mom's prune wine, which Tony and I had been chugging from a flask. The short man snatched my money and nodded toward the steps. At the top of the platform, an attendant held aside a beaded curtain. He followed me as I passed through. Inside the darkened cavern, a silver capsule hung from a thick rope, its curved door cocked open. The attendant nudged me forward and held the capsule still while I crawled inside, at once enclosed by soft, shiny fabric that smelled like old lady perfume. "Comfy?" the attendant asked, peering inside. I nodded. "Sit back and enjoy the ride," he said, as if he'd done this 100 times today.
As the door clicked shut, the capsule began to sway and my stomach lurched. I wondered if it had actually been perfume I'd smelled or something else. I don't remember passing out, but when I came to, the swaying had stopped and I felt a hair in my eye. When I reached up to wipe it away, a thicket of silver bangles fell around my wrists. The door swung open and the attendant beckoned me out. Stepping carefully from the capsule, I gasped at the rhinestone sandals gripping my toes. Air whooshed beneath my manteau as I straightened up. How the hell did I get into a manteau? My breasts jiggled as I nearly tripped down the steps, the ground tilting up toward me. I reached for the railing, steadying myself as I glanced in a mirror hanging next to the exit. Silky brown tendrils of hair and silver hoop earrings framed my new, soft face. A pink headscarf printed with silver crescent moons hung loosely around my head. My long, pale pink fingernails clasped a beaded pink purse and a belt-cinched cream-colored manteau with matching full-length skirt. Not bad, I thought. Brown hair and green eyes, medium height, really just a female version of myself, the sister Tony and I never had. The small man in the top hat grabbed my hand and pulled me forward. Your name, he said, handing me a pink ticket on which was printed Marguerite Jezebel. A lot like my real name, Marcus Jarvisette. By design, I guess, made it easier to remember. Marguerite Jezebel, I whispered as I stuck the ticket in my purse. My purse. Inside it were several coins and bills, a whistle, a pen, and a small orb of cherry fire attached to a neck string. If I'm hit by a solar patroller tonight, I thought, at least my parents will know what happened to me. I flipped the long tail of my headscarf over my shoulder, a gesture I had never before had cause to perform, but now came as naturally as blinking or breathing, and pushed past the picket fence to join my brother in the catcalling crowd. Marguerite Jezebel, I announced, curtsying to Tony. He grabbed my ass and giggled, then tugged at strands of my hair, fanning them between his fingers. You're a gorgeous brunette, he crowed. Nice. Too bad you're my brother. He cupped my breasts in his hands. Sister, I mean. My nipples hardened, followed by a sharp pang of terror deep in my belly. Jesus, I said, slapping his hands away. Well, shall we? He turned and splayed out his hand like a butler. I'm going to skip ahead. He flirts with women, he flirts with men, and then he decides he doesn't have the balls for sex. Oh, I flirted first with girls because that came naturally, and despite the evening's transformation, my loins were still hot for pussy. And there were so many of them, thrilled to be out without their mahrams, their chaperones, for Pink Moon. I tried winking at a few, the tried and true signal, but the girls walked past as if they hadn't seen me. Okay, skipping ahead. I don't remember much more from that night, except being felt up by men, and Tony roughing up a couple of them when they tried for more. I didn't wake up with a man, or a woman, and I spent the remaining days and nights of Pink Moon avoiding my parents. My dad had always been freaked out by the womanizers. Instead, hidden beneath my headscarf, I spent the days with Tony walking through the decorated plazas and binging on cotton candy, and in my private hours, exploring my new, luscious anatomy. I remember thinking, what fun, I should do this every year. The problem, of course, was that it didn't wear off like it was supposed to, like it had for every other guy who'd ridden the Womanizer before, had his fun, and then went back to normal before the end of Pink Moon. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Thank you all for coming out. Okay. After 3 amazing weeks, I decided to leave my voice here. Well, that's not the truth. Bahz made me do this. Bahz. I decided to leave my voice here, that the waters, the trees, and the earth of the Atlantic Center for the Arts will remember that I, Olufunke, daughter of Olaide and Oshubaya, was here. I've been working on a series of stories connected with water and how it retains memories. I'm going to read a very short excerpt of a short story that I worked on during the residency. It's titled, Water in Green Bottles. Okay, here goes. In my mother's cobwebby kitchen cabinet, in the damp section under the kitchen sink, are an unending line of dusty bottles. Green Seaman Shinap bottles with bits of labels stuck on their bodies. Even in the dark, the bottles stand tall, seemingly unmovable. I bring one into the light, and clumps of cobwebs and dust fall away, revealing two shifting layers of water and sand. The first time Mother saw me trace numbers on the bodies of the dusty bottles, she smiled. She told me the water and the sand came from the pool in her hometown, and the bottles held stories. I opened my first bottle that day. I grabbed the one closest to me and tried to open its rusty cover. It didn't budge. I pulled up my dress, held the bottle's cool body with my knees, and used my dress to open it. The body fell on its side, and water poured on the floor. I reached out to catch the spill, and I touched a memory. 1. A young boy tiptoed through a grass-lined path, riddled with puddles, and he left some of himself in each. He displaced enough water to form a trickle that crept down the path. This mixing of muddy puddles flowed back to a pool hidden behind grasses. He left enough of his lineage in the first puddle. He left his joy in the second, about the brisk, big grass potter that his trap caught in the morning. He left a fear behind for his descendants in another, a fear he hid from his mother. His children will drink from a pool many years later, and his fear will become theirs. 2. An old woman walked through a flood of waters that grabbed at her ankles. She waded into the deeper end of the stream. She pushed aside lily pads and hyacinths, and fishes darted about her. The water reached her waist and chest and neck and covered her head. Her head tie unraveled around her. Her burden dropped off her shoulders and sank to the bottom of the stream. She didn't come up for air. Her lungs filled up with water, and the roots of lilies and hyacinths held onto her body. The waters dissolved the sorrows of her heart. 3. A woman sat by a small stream, alone. She washed a bloody piece of cloth and wept. On her back were welts that shot pain through her body. She dipped her wrapper in the stream and squeezed pink water out of it. She remembered. She washed away her shame in the stream, and grains of sand stuck to her clothes. She washed away some of her pain, but as she waded out of the stream, she stepped into a pain left for her in the past. This pain wrapped around her heart and squeezed until it stopped, but not before she saw what her great-great-grandfather had done in the waters. 4. A young man swam through waist-high water, struggling against the pool of a river. His strength failed him, and the swirling depths pulled him down. It pulled him into rapids, polluted with the deeds of his mother. But the surge of clean water remembered the deeds of his father and carried him onto the other side of the river. These stronger waters roared as they remembered his father, and their voices covered up the noise of the angry waters. 5. A woman gave birth in a sterile room and held on to her baby girl as she waited for the second birth. She heard water tinkle in the room. It called to her. She turned and looked for the source of the sound. She dragged her upper body off the table and sat up. The second birth gushed out of her, a flood of blood clots and water. In an outhouse, her younger sister looked at the blood trickling down her legs from her clenching insides. The younger woman watched her blood mix with her urine, and the earth sucked in both. She became a woman. In a cold city, their older sister washed the blood of a rape off her body under a shower. She didn't cry. She scooped up water and washed the torn flesh at the juncture of her thighs. Red water pooled on the tiled floor of the bathroom for a time. Pain-laced water hissed through pipes and into stagnant gutters. Melted snow trickled into gutters and carried her pain into a canal which drained into a river, which drained into an ocean. The Pacific touched the Atlantic and carried her blood home until her pain slithered under clusters of broad-leaved water lilies. She cursed the man, and the water swelled, absorbing the curse. May his firstborn daughter, up to the 7th generation, know of my shame. Thank you.
I had two choices. I hope my voice doesn't fail me in getting sick. Either poetry or a very old essay. And as I've been listening to the readings tonight, I've been thinking about all of our thoughts about our mentor, master artist Chris Abani. I was thinking about how we've all traveled here, and we are truly seekers. And I think about how in the first week, wandering out to Smyrna Dunes and walking miles of boardwalk, looking for those answers, or sometimes stumbling to the pod, risking encounters with rattlesnakes to find our little fortunes, to find answers. Or even today, a few of us traveled over to Castellano, to Psychic Town, and actually got some fortunes and read. And a couple of us were told that we have a lot of paperwork in our future. Well, duh. We're writers, and some of us are teachers with thousands of pieces of grading waiting for us when we return to our harsh realities on Monday. So I just want to say that we didn't have to go in the woods or to the beach or 30 minutes down the road to Castellano, because we have an oracle, in our midst, and it's Chris Abani. I think what we were seeking is permission to dare, permission to look in the mirror sometimes at what was ugly and scary, and thank you for that. I think we have all been infused with this new bravery. So, in the spirit of the Womanizer, the spirit of Castellano, and the spirit of Chris Abani and all these Haley's Comet friends I've made these couple of weeks, I'm going to read a very old essay. It's been redacted and changed a little bit, but I think it fits the spirit of this place here. Thank you, ACA. Freaks, a love affair. It's not out. I have always loved carnivals. I think it has something to do with my first taste of freedom there. The way my parents used to turn us loose at the curb with 20 bucks burning in our pockets, hoping for the best we wouldn't run away with a circus, or at the very least, off to a dark corner for a makeout session with a toothless carny. And I have to admit, that last possibility excited me. As a young girl, it was a creepy thrill the way those carnies put their hands between your legs to belt you in. It was the first time a strange man touched me while asking, as he tugged hard on the buckle, "Does that feel good?" My friends loved the funhouse mirrors, but those things made me dizzy. Instead, I begged for the freak shows. But my girlfriends, squeamish but really more willing to squeal after teenage boys, were usually too scared. Probably just like I was too scared to talk to teenage boys. But I remember going in alone anyway and seeing Lizard Boy, the world's fattest man, Rubber Band Woman, and the Bearded Lady. And to this day, I do not know if the Bearded Lady was really a lady at all. I felt too ashamed to stare her down, examine her face, search the paisley lapel of her dress for two pendulous breasts, because all I saw when I drew back that tense, heavy tarp was the sign she held up. It read, "Need liver transplant. Please help. Give today. God bless." I don't remember what I did then. Most likely my money was already blown on death trap rides and elephant ears. I probably caught the dark shadow of her face from the corner of my eye as I skirted away looking down at my feet. And a couple of years after those dusty tarpaulin wanderings, yet another freak caught my eye. Or maybe I caught his. I was a shy teenager reading in the dark corners of my house, gobbling up Southern Gothic authors like Carson McCullers and Eudora Welty. He was a UPS driver and more than twice my age. He would breeze by with his styrofoam peanuts, snowing my driveway and fill my soft and spongy head with queer stories. We talked about strange movies we loved. My favorite being Ingmar Bergman's Fanny and Alexander, his being the New York City midnight showing of Alejandro Jodorowsky's cult spaghetti western, El Topo. He described in detail the scene where two halved men tied themselves together with rope and crossed the desert on horseback. I could never get that image out of my head, and so years later, long after this man had died from skin cancer, I found the rare film online. My friend had gotten many of the details wrong, though. Of course he did. He was probably tripping on acid in the theater that night. But there was a naked child and a man on horseback, and plenty of maimed and deformed characters. But still, two halved men tied together with rope, trying to make a whole person. I sometimes wonder if that is what this man and I were doing together in the end. The writer Steve Almond said, "We don't choose our freaks, they choose us." I think about this as I recall responding to a Match ad. The man had posted something to the effect of, "Wanted, a woman who isn't afraid to fly her freak flag." Well, cast weird bait and catch a weird fish is what I thought at the time. And we both certainly did. We freak flagged our way across the world, bannering our bodies like performance artists, stamping our passports with exotic visas, wrapping ourselves up in our flags like psychedelic glowworms and magic remnant carpets as we rolled from festival to festival, from country to country. And our freak flags were sacrilegious too. We dragged them through the dust, we burned holes in their stars, and we started to forget them, to fly them on actual patriotic events, days we ended up sleeping through. I have since folded up my freak flag like a good Girl Scout, but first I pulled it down to half-mast. It left on the pole with its grommets pinging in the wind like the mournful dings of a marina at night. When I finally reeled it in, I rose up the white flag of surrender in its place. I'm gonna skip. In many ways, I am the circus performer. I am good at swallowing bolts of fabric, yards and yards of beautiful batiks. I am good at swallowing secrets. I sit quiet and reserved, but I can still feel that flag fluttering inside of me, flapping against my ribs, Jonah tickling my uvula with a feather. It always seemed to take another freak, someone who would sense that fire in my belly, to reach down and pull it out of me. I still occasionally pull out my old freak flag. It's locked away in that steamer trunk full of memories, stored next to the dried up belly buttons, the soft locks of hair, the little black books ledgered with moral inventories. I keep it in there. It is a thing to behold, a festival tapestry soaked in the symbolic blood wine of San Fermin. When I twirl it, the world sees red and the bulls come charging. It is powdered with dust, magic and fairy and archaeological, like the chalky air from the Parthenon or Baalbek or Knossos. Though my freak flag can no longer travel, one patch test at airport security would set the alarms free. Sometimes I still like to wrap it around my naked body and sit and dream and think. And what I like to think about are all the beautiful freaks in my life who've helped me fly my flag boldly, without fear. The beautifully broken people who brandished their scars, sat themselves upon stools in circus slideshows, and said it to everyone, "Go ahead, it's okay to look." Thank you.
Paul Gladstone Reid. Those are some snippets of themes I've been developing an emotional canvas of Frederick Douglass. It's the subject of an exhibition called Picturing Frederick Douglass. He, as well as being an abolitionist and an international suffrage, became the most photographed man of the 19th century, with some 156 photograph images, much more than the 127 images of his friend Abraham Lincoln. He was using photography to really remake the image and perception of oppressed people. And this was done primarily from Rochester, where Kodak Eastman, the revolution of photography and technology began. Rochester is where he is buried. So Isaac Julien, the artist I am working with on what is now my 5th project, has been commissioned by the Memorial Art Gallery in Rochester to present Picturing Frederick Douglass and Rochester Pictures next February. And I'm doing music for what will become a multi-screen installation of a number of manifestations. But in the process of looking into Frederick Douglass's life, I realized that he was a keen violinist. His grandson, Joseph Douglass, was the first African-American concert violinist, playing at the White House twice and at great concert halls internationally. There is an interesting statement which Frederick Douglass wrote. I sometimes, at long intervals, try my old violin, but after all, the music of the past and of imagination is sweeter than any my unpracticed, non-skilled bow can produce. So I lay my dear old fiddle aside and listen to the soft, silent, distant music of other days, which, in the hush of my spirit, I still find lingering somewhere in the mysterious depths of my soul. What was this music? The spirituals developed in Frederick Douglass's day, pretty much towards the end of the 19th century. He's speaking of the music of perhaps his grandparents. What was that music of that African diaspora that developed in the Americas? So I began a research journey, which I will share with you some snippets. We'll move this over here. Frederick Douglass and his grandson, the violinist. It's made me look at a lot of the traditional traditions of the Central and West African nations that form the music, culture, and religious practices in the Americas, and how that practice has been suppressed but still persists in various colonial forms of music making. It's made me also look at the marching band music of his time. People like Francis B. Johnson, born in the Caribbean in 1792, became one of the leading marching band leaders and orchestra leaders of African Americans in the mid-19th century. His brass band would regularly swap their brass instruments for string instruments and become an actual string classical orchestra. But they said that the music was very different from the general European music of the day. Unfortunately, a lot of his scores were burnt in fire, so we're only left with the meager melodies. But we can but imagine what the kind of extemporization of that music was. Also, Nathaniel Clark Smith, the guy with the glasses and the hat in the middle on that page, he said that his father knew Frederick Douglass. He himself said that he accompanied Frederick Douglass at 8 years old, singing Steal Away. He became the man that composed the funeral march for Frederick Douglass when he passed away. And these two figures form a pillar of 19th century African American music into the 20th century. I'm looking at vocal traditions of melisma, which I'll explain and do a demonstration of in a moment, and how that links into African American music, but also links into lots of folk music traditions around the world. There are traditions called ring shout, which I know many from the South will remember how that music goes. And there are similar traditions of ring shout in the Caribbean. The bottom picture here, that's actually in Jamaica, and that's a very similar circular movement, matches cosmology, movement of the planets whilst they sing and do their rituals. Hymnlining is something that links West Africa, where it's in the Malian tradition of Senegal, Gambia, and Mali, where the lead singer will sing out a line which will be repeated in call and response fashion, but the singers will sing in their own customary vernacular. And this also carries into what is called Gaelic psalm singing, which is very familiar to the Appalachian kind of singing, all very kind of pentatonic and plaintive. The Gaelic psalm singing, Malian singing, and hymnlining has resonances like this. Malian. Gaelic psalm singing. Hymnlining. Which is in many ways pre-Christian in terms of what was considered to be pagan music of the time, which had to be stamped out and regulated by the formal church. But from that, obviously, we get the spirituals, one being one of Frederick Douglass's favourite songs, which he sang, I think, at an after party with the Swiss Jubilee Singers. between the spirituals and blues gospel, which pretty much bring the sacred and the profane together at the same time. We have the harkening back to an older tradition that I'm very interested in. It's something that happened between the 7th century and the 15th century in the Mediterranean, when the Ghanaian empires, Ashanti kingdoms, etc., and the Mandinka Empire, Mali, in the Sahel region, were trading a lot of gold to the Byzantine, Genoese, Florentine, and Venetian banking families. And they controlled what began to be the international monetary and maritime empire, and lending money to various nations across Europe to control them through debt. It happened to be the same gold that much later would be lent to Christopher Columbus on his expeditions by the Bardi family. But during this period in Europe, the Moors and what was also called the Black Moors brought their music along with their culture and their trade. Lots of the singing, which we call melisma, that has this very kind of something that you have that kind of trembling ornamentation which you have in Native American music, Aboriginal music, a lot of the Eastern European music, Arabic music, and a lot of African music. But that very same went into early troubadour music and into early music to become la la la, where we had improvisation, ornamentation on the melodic line in the Baroque French tradition. And then this also went over to Latin America to become what they called Ibero-Latin American Baroque music, where African and Native American performers were actually in employment. So I'm investigating that region along with the music of Africans that were found to be in America when Juan Hernando de Soto arrived. They talk about, they preserve traditions of great antiquity in rhymes and chants. Dancing and physical exercise are held in honor. What are these traditions of great antiquity in rhymes and rhythms? Speculative music of an ancient tradition. This is something I did for the African Union, bringing together performers from 50 different nations across the African continent for a stadium epic in Senegal, where we brought all of those traditions together, and I'm going to be working with that to incorporate into what I would call the African-American symphonic tradition, primarily driven by Henry Burleigh, who was a friend of Dvorak, who pretty much wrote the New World Symphony and American Quartet based upon the spirituals which Henry Burleigh taught to him. That music then went into the music of William Grant Still, Florence Price and William Dawson, that became the first founding of contemporary classical symphonic music in America. William Grant Still at the top there on the right was the first symphony to be performed in an African-American composer by the Rochester Philharmonic, and I believe that has something to do with Frederick Douglass, the ghost of Frederick Douglass and the spirit of Rochester. So this is going to end up into a symphonic work for perhaps 90 minutes. While I've been here, I've been fortunate enough to be introduced to the wonderful Bethune Cookson concert chorale, who are absolutely amazing, and developing what might become a 60 to 90 minute choral work. So, shall I just do something else just to close? Please.
Boa noite.
Good evening, everybody.
Primeiramente, assim, pediram para a gente dar umas palavrinhas para os estudos abertos, né?
So first of all, they asked us to speak a little bit about our time here. We're the artists who have the Open Studio Works.
Bem, então eu queria começar por alguns agradecimentos, né?
So I wanted to begin with some acknowledgements.
Ainda mais que está filmando, seria muito bom.
And since it's being filmed, it would actually be good to say that out loud.
Primeiro, eu queria agradecer muito ao Residency de Salvador por apoiar essa iniciativa de artistas negros da cidade e desse coletivo específico que é ligado a Aracá.
So first I'd like to thank the Goethe Institute in Salvador, Bahia, which is an institute that agreed to support Black artists from Salvador, specifically this collective, Aracá platform, for being here and doing this work.
E agradecer, um agradecimento muito especial que é para Isaac e Julien, que nos convidou quando ele estava em Salvador, depois de assistir uma obra nossa, Quase Ilhas.
And a very special thank you to Isaac Julien, who invited us to be here after seeing our opera in Salvador, Bahia, earlier this year.
E é claro, agradecer a ACA, a Ivan, a Nick, a Alexa, aos residentes que estão aqui também.
Okay, and of course to thank, everybody at ACA, Ivan, Nick, Alexa, of course all the residents. We're very happy to have met you.
Tem sido e está sendo uma experiência muito incrível, né? Colocar aqui nossas proposições poéticas, apresentando nossas obras aqui para as pessoas da residência.
And it's been, and it continues to be, an incredible experience, bringing our poetic proposals to this space, sharing the different kinds of work that we're doing while we've been here, and where we'd like to continue to go with that.
E propondo também encontros muito bonitos, né, entre aqui na residência, o Paul, que está aqui, que também trabalha com o Isaac, como ele disse, Chris, Fuchs, foram encontros, Bahz, foram encontros também muito intensos, né, muito bonitos, né, então por isso também a gente é muito agradecido também por esses encontros.
And it's also been an experience of meetings, of very powerful meetings of people and experiences and knowledge, and it's been, for us, something that's been very full, especially with Chris and Funke, Bahz, Paul, who also mentioned that he's working with Isaac, but yes, with Paul, with all of you, it's been very powerful exchanges.
Bem, eu acho que não é necessário falar, mas é muito, mas para mim se torna necessário dizer que é uma experiência também muito importante no que se refere a artistas negros da Bahia, de Salvador. É uma coisa rara para esses artistas e principalmente...
Yeah. And specifically this moment that we're in right now, it's extremely important that Black artists from Salvador, Bahia are here. It's extremely rare that artists from Brazil, from Bahia specifically, get these kinds of opportunities.
Ainda mais levando em conta, não sei se todos já sabem ou estão antenados com o que está acontecendo no Brasil no que se refere à política. Então acabamos de eleger, por exemplo, um fascista no governo, como presidente da República. Então isso, querendo ou não, vai contra muitas iniciativas artísticas no Brasil e principalmente para esses artistas que não têm tantas oportunidades de expansão poética e estética, vai ficar ainda cada vez mais difícil. Desculpe que no Fuchs, porque fala desse cara já me deixa
So, I don't know if you all are aware, especially why this is important right now. Politically speaking, Brazil just elected a fascist to run the country. And what that means for artists, for initiatives that try to expand cultural ideas, it's a huge threat, and it's something that is, when we go back, is going to be expanding a different kind of thinking that threatens the work we do and who we are as people, especially as Black people.
Ou seja, para quem já era difícil, vai ficar cada vez mais.
So who's, in other words, who's already in kind of a disadvantaged position is going to be even more complicated.
Principalmente para propostas como a da Aracá, que é uma plataforma fundada por mim e por Laís Machado.
Especially for initiatives like the Aracá platform, which was founded by me and Laís Machado.
Que são propostas de expansão transdisciplinares e poéticas.
Which are proposals that are about transdisciplinary expansion in terms of artistic languages.
Bem, para finalizar, eu gostaria também de convidar para que vocês olhassem e vissem as instalações performáticas que vão estar nos estúdios aqui do Atlantic Center. E acredito que é isso.
Okay. And to finalize, I'd like to invite everybody to come to the Open Studios, dance studio, the sculpture and painting studio to see some of the installations that we've put together.
Could you introduce
Thank you
the others?
very much.
Can you introduce the others of your group?
Just for who the other artists from Brazil are, if you guys can stand up. So this is for Diego's in the studio already.
Why don't the rest of the group, all the artists in residence?
All the other artists in residence, take a bow. Beginning a small performance right now to lead us out to the door. So if you'd like to follow me through that, feel free.
Woo! Yes.
For those of you who are not aware, today and tomorrow is Dia de los Muertos. I'm of Guatemalan ancestry, and that's a tradition I am dedicated to every year. And coincidentally, I was here at ACA for this event, and I was able to build the altar of my dreams with all of the resources. So thank you, ACA, which is the altar that you see outside of the building. So I will be singing a song to give offering. Thank you.
Bye. Egungumba, 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 Wesa, Egungumba, Wase Iba, Egungumba, Wesa, Mope, Egungumba, Wesa, Egungumba, Wesa, Egungumba, Wase Iba, Egungumba, Wesa, Mope, Egungumba, Wesa, Egungumba, Wesa, Egungumba, Wase Iba, Egungumba, Wesa, Mope, Egungumba, Wesa, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wese, Mope, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wese, Mope, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wesa, Mope, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wese, Mope, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wese, Mope, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese, Egungumba, Wese Iba, Egungumba, Wese, Ibe, Egungumba, Wese.
Seus cabelos e as baquetas. Saúdo a formação em que estão, pois parecem todas irmanadas no mesmo barco. Como o barco que trouxe as tradições percussivas para o território onde eu pertenço. Eu saúdo as mulheres que tocam os tambores no Burundi. Eu saúdo seus tambores. Eu saúdo seus olhos, seu cansaço de tocar sob o som, suas rugas, seus cabelos, tudo que está em sua volta adornando sua marcha. Eu saúdo suas roupas. Eu saúdo porque são uniluz, como eu. Eu saúdo as mulheres que tocam tambores na Tanzânia. Eu saúdo as suas contas com as minhas. Eu saúdo as cores das suas contas, como as minhas. Eu saúdo suas peles, seus sorrisos, sua marca, sua distração, sua concentração. Eu saúdo os tambores entre as pernas, tambores sexo, tambores ventre, e saúdo suas mãos.
nínú ìṣọ́kù mo jẹ́rìí sí ara ẹni tí ó gbẹ. Àìróorun sùn jẹ́ ìbànújẹ́ ìrora tipẹ́. Gbígbọ̀n ara tó dàbí iyemọ̀jẹ̀. Ara rẹ̀ ní sínú